Hello and welcome to the QubaHQ tutorials. I'm Kuba Michalski and today I'm going to show you how to create 100% accurate reflections in After Effects. Creating the reflection for a 3D layer is a fairly easy process. You can either do it manually or use a multitude of different plugins that are available on the market. But what about reflecting a bit more complex scenarios such as particle simulations? Reflecting lights, or reflecting any number of other 3D effects that follow the After Effects 3D camera, such as the trapcode 3D stroke. This gets a little bit more complicated, but not really that hard, so let me show you how it's done. So let's create a fairly typical scene in here. I'm going to make a new composition, set it at PAL-DV widescreen square pixel, maybe shorten it to say 10 seconds. We're not really going to be needing that much time. And call it main comp. We're going to have more of them, so it's good to see what's going on where. Inside of that, we're going to create a new solid 500 by 500 pixels, call it floor. That's going to be our main floor layer that stuff will be reflecting through. Set it to white color because we're going to be using lights and we need to see it pretty well. Switch it to a 3D layer, rotate it by 90 degrees along the x-axis, and we can't see anything right now because it's facing the camera perfectly, but as soon as we create a camera and bring it up a little bit, it will become visible again. So we have the floor. Let's create some text as well. Reflections. Is it centered? Yes, so I just need to set it at the same position as the plane, only without the rotation. So enable 3D properties 512 288, and it's sitting there perfectly. Right now let's create a camera. 35mm is fine. Let's rename it to main camera. Put it in the scene and maybe parent it to a null. It's always good to have a bit of a rig going, so I can rename that null as dolly, set it as a 3D layer, parent the camera to it, and right now I can adjust the rotation properties of that. So we're looking at the scene from a bit more interesting angle. I think I could also bring the camera a bit closer to the scene. Everything of course looks terribly white right now, and that's because we have no lights in the scene, so let's introduce some of those. New light. I'm going to set it at, let's say, 75%, so it's not too bright. We don't need shadows, that would only slow us down, but we can later on use shadows in this setup if we want to. Okay, so that's our light. Let's bring it up a little bit, maybe to the right, a bit to the back, and maybe create a copy of it. Move that copy all the way to the left side and recolor it to something else. So the first one is kind of orangish yellow, well, actually orange. Let's make the other one lime green. So we have a nice sort of gradient going through our text. And right now our floor doesn't look too good, so let's quickly scale it up a little bit. Let's punch it up to something like 3000, and we're starting to get the scene. Now, just so that we can see our lights in the scene, I'm going to create a new solid layer, call it flares, set it to composition side and black background color, and apply Video Copilot's optical flares on top of it. Now, you don't really need to use optical flares. You can use any plugin that creates some sort of visualization for the light. It can be Null Light Factory, it can be Trapcode Lux. I'm using natural flares because they look kick-ass and calculate really fast. So I think in my demos I was using the blue steel preset, and for now I'm just going to hide all the other settings for it except for the glow, so that it goes really simple. We're going to turn them back on later on. As you can see, this flare is fairly complex. Alright. And set it to track lights, and right now it's showing our two lights grabbing their color. Now they're way too bright at the moment, so we can switch the brightness to something like 50%. That should be fairly good. Also, we should switch the transfer mode of flares layer into add or screen something that will make it visible. And we can do actually the same thing to the floor, because we're going to have reflections layers and we want to be able to see them. So I'm going to switch the floor into screen right now. That's pretty good. And why don't we create a very simple animation for the dolly? So just going to grab the rotation, oops, not that property, go a bit to the left, set the keyframe, go, let's say 10 frames ahead, and turn the camera around. So basically this is our animation. Nothing very spectacular. So how would we go about creating the reflections in this scene? Well, since I already have the Video Copilot plugins folder open, one of the methods would be to select our text and apply VC Reflect to it. We would have to adjust the position and set up the angle, etc, etc. Now, I mean, the proper way to do it would actually be to first pre-compose the text, then apply the plugin and use that pre-comp in our main scene. But the problem with it is you would have to apply it to every single layer that you want to reflect. This scene is very simple, but if you have more complex setup, it could be quite time-taking. Another most probably commonly used method is simply to make a copy of our layer and scale it along the y-axis into the -100. And that creates an accurate reflection. We can then lower the opacity and there we go. But again, we run into the same problem. We have to apply it for every single layer we have, and it only works for texts and 3D layers. It would do nothing to lights, it would do nothing to particles or any other effect that uses the 3D camera. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to show you the method that I developed when creating the trailer for June. I wasn't planning to do a tutorial on reflections, but once I've seen how easy it becomes, I decided to share it with you guys. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to duplicate our main comp, and remember, you do it at the very end of your compositing process. So you want all the layers, all the stuff that is in the world above the floor to be already present, because otherwise if you do it in the beginning, all the elements that you add will not be included in the reflections. We're going to change the name into reflections. Open that composition, parent our dolly, which is right now the top of the camera's chain, into the floor, and scale the floor along the z-axis. Now, I'm using z-axis because we already rotated the floor, so I'm just adding a minus before the value. Boom, the reflection is on the opposite side. We can right now also turn off the floor because we don't need to see it. Go back to the main comp, bring our reflections layer, well, I can't really see the size of the composition, bring our reflections layer, put it underneath the floor, which you've seen we set to screen mode, and then adjust the opacity of this. And right now, can we see it at any point? I probably didn't place the lights in a very good position. Now we can see that, I mean, this light is actually created a glow in here and creates another glow in there. So it's basically that simple. Parent your stuff to the floor, flip the z-axis, and you have perfect reflections. Well, thank you very much. I'm QubaHQ, and I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and now I'm gonna watch a cat jump in a box. Isn't it cute? Come on! Okay, alright, I'm kidding. The method is a bit more complex than that, and I have to show you some more stuff. This is not the end of the tutorial. Let's continue. Okay, so first of all, let's explain what's going on, how this whole thing works, and why are we flipping certain axes, and what's the reason for all that insanity. So I'm going to get rid of the reflections layer and set up a brand new composition, call it explanation, and that's going to be PALDV square pixel, smaller, easier to manage. And First of all, I'm going to bring the floor, turn it into 3D layer, just as before, rotate it by 90 degrees, but this time, just to make things easier to understand, I'm just going to change its position into the exact center of our virtual universe. So it's positioned at 0, 0, 0. Camera's looking at a different place, but we're going to fix it in a second. Actually, we're going to fix it now. Let's create a new camera, and this is, again, main camera. Set it to OK. And I'm going to color it into aqua. Aqua is going to be the color of all our layers above the ground. So I want the point of interest to look exactly at the center of our floor. So 0, 0, 0. And the position to be at 0, 0, and maybe minus 500. And then I can bring it up by, let's say, 150 pixels. Whoops, minus 150. All right, let's put some text in there. The text can say text. Wow, why is it red? Let's switch at least a part of it into white. And again, set it to be a 3D layer, position 0, 0, 0. So it sits right there. All right, now if we look at this scene from left, where is it? In here, left view. We see nothing. Great. Let's pull out a little bit and adjust our settings. Okay, this is our camera. It's looking at the place where the text is touching the floor. And why isn't the text aqua? All right. So our camera is looking at the place where the text is touching the floor and seeing it from there. What I'm going to do actually, and that should simplify it a little bit, is I'm going to change the zoom level here until the top line touches the top of our layer. And you know what? Actually, I should bring this camera a bit closer. So let's move it somewhere here so that we can see everything a little bit better. Then readjust the point of interest back to 0, 0 and switch our zoom, which was at some insane value, to encompass the entire layer. Okay. So this is our scene right now, right? If we look at what does the camera see, well, we're pretty zoomed in, but you can see that the top of the text is exactly at the top of the screen, and the contact spot is exactly in the middle. Back to the left view. Now, if I take our text, create a copy of it, recolor it into, let's say, yellow, and that's gonna be the color for everything below the ground, and do that scaling trick in which I just flip it into -100 on the y-axis, and we'll look at what our camera sees right now. We can see that it's viewing original layer with the top portion of the screen and the reflection in the bottom portion of the screen. Now, our current position for the camera, let's see it. Let's just unscroll the position, is minus 67.6. Let's just make it minus 65 so it's simpler. Minus 65 and whatever distance it is from the layer. If I create a copy right now of this camera, recolor it into yellow because it's going underground, and just move it to the equal distance from the floor but below, so instead of minus 65 it's going to be 65, you can see that this new camera right now views our reflection at the bottom portion of the screen, and it's perfectly touching the range of the view, and sees our main layer the same way we used to see the reflection. So this is a perfect mirror setup. The problem is that if I right now view it from our active camera, which became our reflection, let's call it reflection camera, everything is reversed. Now it's a little bit hard to see, so let's just add a light to the scene. Where do we have it? Layer, new light, and we don't need any colors, just the 100. Okay, everything is flipped upside down in here. So by toggling the reflection and the main camera on and off, we can see that this is what we see from the main layer, and I actually should make the floor a little bit transparent so we can see our reflection. So I can see our main layer and our reflection from the main camera, and then I switch on the reflection camera and we're seeing everything flipped around. Now why this happens is because I simply moved the camera below. I did not flip it upside down. So let's do it again. Let's bring this camera back up. Again, I'm going to switch to a side view from the left side. Let's take our reflection camera, bring it back to -65 so it aligns with our original, and instead I'm right now going to create a new null object, set it to be 3D, position it at 0, 0, 0, so it sits right here. Maybe a bit difficult to see, why don't we move it? It doesn't really matter if we move it to front or back, the vertical position is what really matters. Okay, parent our reflection camera to that little bugger and flip him instead. And you can see that our camera distorts, goes into a really weird moment there when the scale is at 0, and then comes back at the opposite side, but this time it is flipped. Now, the cameras in After Effects are just boxes. They don't have those little circles on top signifying the reel, but if they did, the reel of our original camera would be here, and the reel of our copy camera would be here. So if we view right now, what do the cameras see? The view is almost identical. Now, it may be a bit difficult to figure out which one is the original, which one is the reflection, so let's recolor them. Let's take our original, color it all into white, and take our reflection and color it all into red. So our original camera sees the real layer on top of the screen and the reflection at the bottom, and our reflection camera in exactly the same positions sees our original layer at the bottom as a reflection and reflection on the top as a real one. So what does it mean? That means right now I can get rid of our reflection and simply render the scene from the main camera showing objects above the ground, and from the reflection camera showing the objects below the ground. And when I composite these two together, I'm going to get the perfect scene with the reflections. Now this is all great when you're using either a free floating camera that you animated yourself, or you parent it to your own null and everything runs in absolute values. The problems arise when either the camera or the nulls have expressions that determine their position. And that's exactly the case with a very popular plugin called Video Copilot Sure Target. And I know that a lot of you are using this as your camera rig and rely on its automation of the camera movements rather than hand animation. It wouldn't be really too fair to you to present you a solution that works fantastically but does not work with your favorite plugin. So let's see what happens when we use SureTarget. So I'm going to come back to my original composition where we had our reflections and get rid of the dolly we have, maybe even bring the camera back to its original position and perhaps bring it up just a little bit and create a SureTarget rig. So let's zoom out here, give ourselves a little bit more space. You need the minimum of 3 3D null objects to work with SureTarget, so let's create one. That's going to sit in the middle, and that's going to be actually called SureTarget, and this is where our plugin will be applied to. And then we need some targets that the SureTarget will follow, so I'm just gonna make a copy, call this one target 01, make another copy, target 02. Alright, so SureTarget, parent the camera to it, and apply the plugin. And first of all, something weird happens, but that's because we didn't define our targets yet. So let's do that. Target layers, target 1 will be 1, target 2 will be 2. Okay, and let's just adjust them a little bit so we have some movement. Right now they're both sitting at exactly the same spot. We can move this towards the letter R. Maybe zoom it in a little bit. And I need to enable rotation to follow the rotation of this layer. So let's just... of course, it's pretty far from the camera, so it doesn't do much. Let's not rotate this one. Let's set up the SureTarget keyframes. Effects, SureTarget 1. And at 10 seconds, let's make it 5 seconds. Why so long? Switch it to 2. And maybe we can turn this layer around a little bit to give a little bit of craziness to the scene. So let's get that one, rotate it on the Z-axis, rotate it on the Y-axis, and also on the X-axis. Okay, so we have ourselves a simple animation in here, right? Maybe I can reposition this a little bit so when we do the reflections, we'll see the reflected lights as well. Okay, so this is our movement right now. Our entire rig and the idea of reflections depends on the ability to parent our camera tree to a null. So let's create a new null object. And I'm just going to call it reflector. Make it a 3D layer and position it at the same place where the floor has its center. So it's already there. Right now, grab the SureTarget and parent it to reflector. And what happens is the whole hell breaks loose. The camera is completely in the place we did not expect it to be, and the whole thing looks plain wrong. Now this could still work if the center of our composition and the place that everything is relative to would be at the 0, 0, 0 coordinates. But that's not a very likely scenario, and I wouldn't want to force you to change your habits. So why does it happen? Why do we have errors in here? Well, it's pretty simple. SureTarget calculates its position, rotation, and all the transform properties via expressions. And the effect does not take under consideration the possibility of this layer being parented to something. So as soon as we parent it, it doesn't recalculate its position in relation to the parent, but keeps the values as they were, and basically our camera flies somewhere away. Now, if I move the reflector to 0, 0, we would get the original animation, but then when we try to flip it, we would no longer be flipping through the center or through the plane where the floor is. So right now brace yourself, because some serious math is coming and we're going to reverse engineer the way SureTarget works and bring our animation to the correct spot. So let's do this. Rather than trying to accommodate both cameras in a single scene and making it all very complex, I'm just going to unparent the SureTarget from the reflector, get rid of our reflector, and continue the process in the same way you've seen before. So we're going to go to our project, make a copy of our main comp, call it reflections, and work in there. Attached to the project file, you will find a text file called expressions.txt, and that's where all the expressions you will need to use are located, and they are here. They may look a bit intimidating at the first glance, but only the first one is a bit complicated. The rest is basically grabbing the values and reverting them. So let's just see what's happening in here in the unsure target position. Let me explain first of all what's going on. In our reflections comp, we're going to change the name of SureTarget into unsure target, and that's not because we're not sure about it, but it's because we're untangling what SureTarget has done, and our main camera can be renamed into reflection camera. Now we maintain the link, so reflection camera is still parented to unsure target, only that at this point unsure target will not have the effect on it. Before I get rid of it, I'm gonna turn off the expressions, otherwise we're gonna get a whole lot of errors. So I deleted all the expressions. Now I'm taking the SureTarget and deleting it from our reflection rig. Okay, so let's see. This is our first expression, and what it does is, first you need to link it to the SureTarget layer, or a SureTarget null, actually. Maybe I can change it so that it's easier to see later on for you. And second link is to the floor. So this way we'll be able to measure the distance between our SureTarget null and the floor. So first what we're doing is we're getting our absolute values of both the SureTarget and the floor. So in case they are parented to something else, etc., we're using a two-world expression to get the exact value. And you may see that we're getting the position, but it says anchor point. Well, don't worry about it. This is how the convoluted process of writing this expression works. So our cam position basically becomes the spot in which our SureTarget sits, and our floor position is where the floor sits. And then we have the height difference, and that's basically the height of our camera minus the height of our floor. So at this point, this value tells us how far is our SureTarget layer from the floor. From then on, it's an easy ride. Basically, we take the position of our, well, it says cam because I wrote it this way. It doesn't really make much sense. Maybe I should change the name of the values in here. Let's call it target position, target position. Copy that, paste it here, and paste it here. All right, that makes more sense. So we get our target position, which is exactly where our original SureTarget sits, and we subtract from it the distance from the floor twice. So when we subtract it once, it levels with the floor, and we subtract it again, it goes to the opposite side. So we grab this expression, go to our unSureTarget, unroll position, and paste it there. And we're immediately gonna get some errors, and that's because we did not link it yet. So to link it, let's just split our, that's not going to work. Okay, let's split our timeline in two. Reflections at the bottom, explanation not necessary, main comp on the top. Let's get the SureTarget position. Actually, we don't even need position. All right, we get our unSureTarget, expand, and we're looking, link me to SureTarget now. Okay, we select it, including the stars or asterisks, and just link it to the SureTarget. Not to any property, just to the layer name. And the same thing with the floor, link me to the floor. So select that, link it to the floor. And right now, as I release, something happens. Now, it doesn't really look much similar, but that's because the reflections are not in, and one more important property is not in, which I'll show you in a moment. So let's get back to our expressions text. UnSureTarget X rotation. So this will be applied to the X rotation of our UnSureTarget. X rotation enable, paste, and again, link me to SureTarget layer. Yes, sir. You are now linked. And you may see that the only thing this thing does is basically it grabs the rotation of SureTarget and inverts it. That's so when our layer or our camera rotates, the reflection will be properly countering that rotation. Next is UnSureTarget Y rotation. Copy that, go to Y rotation, paste it. Now I wish I could develop a preset for that you can easily apply, but I really hate applying something and then getting something like 7 different expression errors and having to fix them. So I think the manual way is relatively painless. Link it to the SureTarget, release. Okay, we're starting to get something in here. I mean, if we compare it, we start to get some tilt, and it soon is going to be perfect. We go back to our expressions, UnSureTarget Z position, Z rotation. And you can see that Y rotation remains identical between the two, and Z rotation again needs to be reversed. That's again about that countering of the original rotation. So paste that, expand it, select, and hook up to SureTarget. And this is bringing us fairly close to the reflection. Actually, probably it's right now already correct. But just in case you decided to animate some stuff in your camera, such as changing position or orientation and rotation, you can link those values as well. So I included the two most important ones, the point of interest and the position. But depending on which values you animate, you will want to modify all of those. So this is a straightforward link, no reversing, just link to the main camera and repeat the value, and the same thing for the position. I mean, I don't even have to copy paste that. I mean, what I can just do is grab our camera, reveal position, grab a reflection camera, reveal position, and just link it up. Boom, done. All right, so you can now see that something weird is happening, right? I mean, it's not yet correct. And that's because our reflections rig is not yet flipped upside down. Now, we could do it two ways, all right? What we could do is simply go to our main comp. I can actually bring it back. We're not linking anymore. Go to our main comp, grab our reflections, drop them on top, and scale this just simply in 2D. So scale it vertically into -100 and maybe apply a screen effect. But you see, it's not quite right. There are some problems that we would need to counter. So instead, we're just going to go to our reflections, go to Unsure Target, and scale this one upside down. So again, the middle value, the wide rotation, and now this is flipped. We can go to our main comp, bring in the reflections, and maybe we can bring them underneath the floor like we did before. And there we go. Perfect reflections. And if you right now decide to change your animation, everything is hooked up from that other layer, so the camera will follow perfectly. And as you can see, it obeys not only position but also the rotation and all those values. So this is the base of what we're going to be doing. And basically, to summarize, if you have your own rig that you prepare that doesn't use any fancy expressions, the only thing you need to do is hook up that rig to your floor and flip the floor upside down. And if you're using SureTarget, well, as you can see, the process is a little bit more involved, but still you can get it running in a matter of 1 or 2 minutes of copying expressions and hooking them up. I could finish the tutorial right here because I basically shown you all I was planning to, but what I want to show you right now is basically how does this thing work and what you can do with it. So just add a bit of fancy effects around and also play with lights a little bit just to show you how to make reflections that look more realistic than what we have right now. So I think we can actually start with the lights, because right in this frame we have a situation when we see the original light which is above the floor and its reflection, and this already actually could work. Let me just switch off all the helpers. This could work, but this light is not very spectacular. So what I like to do personally in such situation is to go to our properties of the flares in the main comp and use a proper preset with all the settings on. So this will generate a nice full-fledged flare with all the extra elements, the multi-irises and orbs and hoops and whatnot. As on the picture. We can also scale it down to maybe 70%, so it's not quite so bright. And then we take our reflections, and in here I'm using the same plugin exactly. I'm going to increase the brightness to, let's say, 100, but not apply all these extra effects on it. Actually, 100 could be too much, maybe 80. Okay. And this way, what we get is very bright, shiny spotlights in the original scene and a little bit more dimmed reflections. So I actually have After Effects CS5 opened on another monitor. Let me just bring it in. You can see this is what I did with the demo for this tutorial. So the original lights have all these fancy flares glaring around, etc. And then the reflections use only little spots of lights. I mean, it would be an overkill to have huge reflections everywhere and all the flare elements. And this again, I mean, depends on how much opacity you give it. So if you bring it to, let's say, 65, you're going to see those spots much stronger. But then I don't like the way this reflection looks, so I like to keep it below 50 or at most at 50. And I think this could actually work. So you can still see these lights and the rest is visible. We can also switch the floor transfer mode to add, so that would push the light a little bit more, and even switch our bit depth to 32, and that's going to give us much more depth and strength. So that's a little tip on reflecting the lights. Give a full-fledged flare only to the layer above the floor, and the one that's reflecting, make it blur out a little bit, get a little bit more matte and not so strong. So this is starting to look fairly good. And let's try how does this rig look with particles right now, because frankly speaking, I mean, we could have achieved all these effects simply by copy-pasting all our values and moving them around. But particles are not so easy to reflect. But with this rig, the only thing you'll need to do is copy the layer from one composition to another, and you'll be done. Alright, so let's clean up a little bit in here. We don't need to see all these properties. Actually, we can shy away a bunch of layers. We will need the floor, we will need the text, we don't need the camera, we don't need the sure target, we don't need the lights, the flares, the targets, and we don't really need the reflections right now. And let's create a new black solid, call it particular, and put it on top of everything. Or actually, I shouldn't have shied those layers quite just yet. Put it underneath the flares, so the flares will be on top. Yes, our particles will be behind. Alright. Shy away, and let's set this thing up. So I'm going to use trapcode particular. Now this is not an obligatory part of the tutorial. I'm just trying to demonstrate to you how this reflection rig works with other effects that listen to the After Effects 3D cameras. So where do we have it? Particular. There we go, and let's create something relatively simple. So I'm just going to create a box emitter, set it to be, let's say, 300 by 300 by 50. To see it better, I'll turn off the velocity for a moment, and I can see that I set the sizes wrong. So I want the X to be only around 20, and then now I want this to be 300, Y to be 20, and Z to be 300. Okay, and I can bring it a little bit up and maybe a little bit closer to in front of the 3D writing. And you know what, let's make the particles a little bit more fancy. So I'm just going to create a new composition here. Make it really small, something like 50 by 50 pixels, and call it the particles, and switch the length to just 5 frames. So we're going to create some custom sprites for the particles so that it looks a little bit better. New solid, we don't really need to name it, but it's better to keep it white. And let's just zoom in and create some arbitrary mask on it. Hit M twice, keyframe the mask path, go 1 frame ahead, and let's just modify it a little bit so we can create some different shapes for the particles. And that's one. That's ugly. Let's do something like this maybe. Alright. I mean, normally I would use around 20 different shapes, but we don't really need that many right now. And this could be just a triangle or something close to a triangle. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is my definition of a triangle. Anyway, select all of them and toggle hold keyframe. I don't know if it's still within the recording region. I hope so. So that we don't have any morphing at subframe level. And bring these particles as the bottom layer on our composition. Okay, so let's go to the particular and mess with it a little bit. So the meteor type, everything is fine in here right now. For the particle, we're gonna change the type into textured polygon. For the texture, we're going to select our particles layer. For time sampling, we're going to choose a random still frame, so it just grabs a random frame from our original particles layer. And random seed doesn't really matter. As we change it, they change, but they're gonna be tiny, so nobody's gonna really be able to tell. Next thing, size, maybe down to 3, size random, let's do 60, so there's some variety. Rotation, orient to motion, no, but we want a random rotation at 100, so there's a full randomness happening there. Random speed rotate, maybe 1.5, maybe 2. And distribution at 1, let's say. Let's just quickly preview what's happening here. We can't see them in the beginning, but in here they're pretty visible. I just want to see if they're turning around fast enough. Kinda tough to see still. Maybe I should extend my timeline and see it there. Yeah, okay. There is motion happening. All good. Alright. We don't really want them to be all white, so let's set some lighting for them, or actually it's called shading. Turn it on. Switch the light fall off into none, otherwise the lights are gonna stop affecting the particles quite early in time and we're gonna get some ugly black ones. I would bump the ambient one to maybe 20, although I don't have any ambient lights, so let's just bump the diffuse to 100, specular amount maybe to 30 and sharpness to 50, so that if they're facing and reflecting the lights directly, they'll shine a little bit. Shadow LED we don't really need in this case. And what else can we set up? Well, let's give it some gravity. So I'm gonna switch the physics to bounce. Set the gravity to, let's say, 500. And physics time factor to 1.5. I noticed that whenever I do something with the physics time factor of 1, the whole thing tends to look like it's in slow motion. When I set it to 1.5 or even 2, the things happen a little bit faster and look more realistic. Okay. So I think I exaggerated with the gravity a little bit, maybe 200 should be fine. And since we're in bounce, let's set up our floor layer. So floor layer would be our floor. And we're running it as infinite plane. And then wall layer, we can set to our text. So that's reflections, I believe. No, reflections is our reflections. Where is our text? It should be it. Let me think for a second. Yeah, I don't know. Some error popped out and I didn't really read it. Anyway, we're gonna use layer alpha. Or you know what, the particles are falling flat down, we don't really need it. And I think it needs to be pre-composed before it can be used as reflections. Let's just try again. Text layers cannot be used as well, instead create text in a comp and okay, that's just going to overcomplicate things, so I'll just switch it off. I can use the reflections text as an obscuration layer though. So let's set it here. Also not. Alright. Okay, if you want to bounce things off the text, you basically need to pre-comp it. Since I have one copy here, another copy in the reflections, I don't really feel like doing it, so forget it. Anyway, where are we? So we have those particles falling down. Let's see the moment in which they're above. So I'll want to emit them starting from here. So let's set it at 0, a frame before. And then here bump it up to, let's say, 10,000. And then 1, 2, 3, go 30 frames ahead and slowly bring it back to 0. Did I exaggerate a little bit? I think I did. Yes, that's few too many. Let's try 5,000. You know, we don't want the whole thing to slow down incredibly. Alright, this is fairly nice. And what we can also do is increase the... and switch it to directional first of all. Or actually outwards. Give it a bit more variety. Initial speed of, let's say, 100. Randomize the velocity and distribute it a bit more. And I can already see that our particles are way too huge. So let's just go to the particle size. This is live. Where do we have size? Particle size, let's set it at 1.5. So looks more like confetti. This is all good, I think. What I like to do is set size over live to start at the full size and then have a nice soft ramp towards the end. Alright, let's preview what is this thing that we created. I have a feeling I made everything way too fast. No, it's not too fast, it's just a bit noisy. So this is all good. I can perhaps increase the gravity to 300 right now. And you know what, I'll lower that amount of particles. I mean, 3000 over 1 second, or 5000 over 1 second is a bit too much. Let's set it to 3000. That should give us a little bit more space. So what we do right now is basically check where is our particular right now. And it is at layer 5. We also have the floor, which I can hook up later on, and we'll have our particles. So I'm gonna copy these 2 layers, go to our reflections, go to the beginning, paste them in, and just make sure that our particles are at the bottom. Now, stacking order may affect the ordering or randomization of certain effects, so I just want to keep it there. And this is our particular, it's underneath the flares, and since I copy pasted it, I have to relink it. So link the particles to particles and link the floor to the floor. Okay, and these are our reflections. 100% accurate, no mistakes there. So if I preview it right now, it's going to take 5 years to calculate, of course, but once it's ready, it should show everything quite perfectly. So by the way, in case you wonder, I mean, there's a lot of noise happening on the screen, and it's hard to tell whether I'm just lying to you saying, oh, the reflections are perfect or not. Let's just zoom in a little bit here and look at this two, okay? This one and this one. This is the original, this is the reflection. If I right now go to my reflections and adjust the opacity, you'll see that the reflection is disappearing. Let's bring it back to 50. It may appear very bright, but that's because from certain angle it may reflect the light better than the other one. And as I scroll through, you can see they're coming closer together, hitting the floor and bouncing off. And right now one is traveling up, one is traveling down, and they're perfectly aligned to each other. So this is the proof we have another set in here. Original and the reflection come together, bounce, separate, etc. Now, I mean, they may be disappearing. I mean, they may appear to be disappearing because at certain points they will be facing the camera. And you can actually, whoa, you can actually see the particle is still there, only that it's facing the camera. But everything is correct, and if we just preview the whole scene with the motion blur right now, you will be able to see that the reflections are indeed functioning properly. So there you are, your very own 100% accurate reflections rig. As promised, it's much simpler than you may expect, which I hope comes as a positive surprise rather than a disappointment. Personally, what I like to do with scenes like this is add a little bit more of a definition to the ground. As you can see right now, the ground is a perfect mirror-like surface, so it's kind of hard to tell where we are in space. So for that I usually use a little grungy texture that actually I tend to overuse in my projects. Let's just bring it as footage, merge layers. It's just something like this. Nothing special, and what we can do is just drop it into the main composition, turn it into a 3D layer, maybe turn off the motion blur, and just like we did with the floor, rotate it by 90 degrees along the y-axis. So I mean, right now it's picking up the lights in the wrong way, etc., but this is the whole idea, and that gives you a little bit more flooring or grounding to your composition. And if you're in the market for something much more complex, wait until the next tutorial on the QubaHQ series. We're going to be creating a light rig driven by a color map to create a uniform morphing scene lighting for your 3D compositions. The expressions in that tutorial are sure to blow your mind. I know they caused me a lot of headaches, but for that you will have to wait a few more days or weeks, hopefully not months. Anyway, for QubaHQ, I'm Kuba Michalski, and I'll see you next time.